Trevor in Washington, D.C. says, can you touch upon the role of the German central banks in the current Eurozone crisis? I've heard people say they're the ones that recklessly lent money to countries and banks that couldn't afford to pay back the loans, simply because they would get great returns and the loans would be guaranteed by the ECB.
Well, certainly a lot of the German banks are exposed to, sovereign debt from countries like Greece and Ireland and Italy and Portugal and Spain. And one of the reasons they are so overexposed was because interest rates were held artificially low in Europe and the United States, all around the world. And I think money was lent recklessly to some of these banks in pursuit of a higher yield in that low rate environment. I think there was a moral hazard associated with countries now being a member of the Eurozone and that providing some discipline, despite the fact that these countries were actually getting deeply into debt. I think part of the problem was that a lot of the debts were incurred after the housing bubble burst. And I think a lot of the mistakes that were made by European banks to bail out, or a lot of governments bailing out banks, and that is where the governments got overly indebted. So maybe some of these European banks didn't connect the dots, didn't see the housing bubble bursting, didn't see the governments bailing out their banks, and therefore didn't see the credit quality reduction in the sovereign credit. So they made mistakes just like a lot of other people. But I think that the real problem in the Eurozone is not that some of the banks are overexposed, it's what governments are doing to try to bail them out. All governments are guilty of those sins. I just believe that in Europe, the politicians are being a lot more practical and a lot less politically expedient than the politicians here in the United States. But they're all making mistakes. It's just a question of degree. And I think we're making much bigger mistakes in the U.S., and we're ultimately going to regret that. And I think that they're getting less wrong in Europe.